Hey guys, this is Tearless here. This is my review of Ryse, Son of Rome. This is the graphics powerhouse that Xbox and Microsoft delivered upon release. Its counterpart is Killzone Shadowfall, which I will be reviewing on the same day. Uh, in terms of graphics, this is the best graphics to come out on a next-gen system. 1080p, 900p, it doesn't make a difference. Everything just Ryse takes the cake, and it was beautiful playing through this game, and I loved it. That's the first thing I want to talk about is the graphics in this game were literally top notch. Cinematic sequences were worthy of movie quality, and then even non-cinematic sequences just straight rendered in game absolutely looked phenomenal. Loved playing through this. The only time I had a problem with anything were up close water graphics, like streaming water and like splashes. They didn't look quite as good, but we're being really nitpicky when I get into those types of details. The only other thing I could say is the bodies would disappear at random spots, which I didn't quite get. I don't know if that was more of a CPU thing or a graphics thing, but it really those were the only two things that I had a problem with the graphics in this game. This is the best graphics that have ever come out on a console, period. And I'm not quite sure if it will be beat for a while. We will have to see. In terms of sound, I feel Ryse delivered pretty well with the music that went along with the game. The music that came out really kind of put that emotion in the game, which is what I really like to see. You know, it complemented the storyline, and that's what I really want to see out of a music, especially in a story-driven game. The sound effects, especially the waves, you can hear them in this level, just sound absolutely fantastic. The splashes, etc. They were very authentic sounding. I really loved it. The only problems I had was sometimes sound effects would sound just a little bit over embellished. They went a little too overboard with them. Wasn't too much of a problem, and the music at times could be a little too repetitive. You didn't notice that until like the very end of the game, but for the most part, the music complemented well, and it worked out overall throughout the course of the game. The shortcoming of Ryse really comes in two extremely key areas, which is the design mechanics and the story. Starting off with the design and mechanics, I really did like the clean UI. It had a clean, like, fluid UI. And as far as the combat system is concerned, I really did like how you changed your bonus that you get off of combos, whether it be health or it be more experience. I think that really separated the chumps from the really good people at this game. And that was, you know, kind of fun. And also, in terms of gameplay, it was fun how they varied things. People said it's nothing but just hack and slash the entire time. There were times in which you would set up in a formation, or you would be dodging arrows or something. They would change it up, and I really did like that. They needed to do more of that so it didn't feel as repetitive, because there are sequences in which you are hacking and slashing for a while, but it wasn't quite, you know, as some reviewers have pointed out, like that's all you do. There is some variation, and I really did like that. But really, there were a lot of problems with Ryse. One thing is there were extremely long loading screens. That's something that really bothered me. I'm like, come on, let's get going. Let's get this done. The combat system was really a two-button wonder. You know, like you had your two attack buttons and you had your two dodge buttons or your two defensive buttons, and everything was in a law of twos. You could, you know, you could attack one person twice, and as long as you defended, you were good. Like, you could attack with a sword twice. As long as you switched your shield on the third try, you could pretty much defeat anyone in the game, and that's what it made a difference. However, as I started to play, I realized that heavy hits and whatnot really came into play more, and so it has potential there. They need to change some things and move some things around, and it will be a whole lot better, I believe. I felt they dumped too many resources into the killing blows of this game. You know, yeah, it's cool. I'm like, oh man, I just did that. That's kind of cool. I think my favorite time ever is I killed someone by drowning him by stomping on his head into the water, which I thought was awesome. But otherwise, it wasn't like the killing blows were. I'd much rather kind of just kill someone normally. It was more fun that way. The combos made it feel kind of like a. People say it's a QTE, but really that was only with a combo with the like the finishing blows. For the most part, it was like your very simplified fighter. I kind of wish they would make it into more of a fighting type, game with more complexity in the combat system, and then not worry so much about the killing blows. As far as the killing blows, it was really lame when you did go through that QTE sequence that you even if you got it wrong, you still got the killing blow. I feel like if you got it wrong, you should not be getting the killing blow. Uh, Simple as that. Like, I don't think that should be there. As far as level design is concerned, there were invisible barricades, which I really hated. Like, I'm like, oh man, I can run out here, and then realize that I can't. They would just set up, random stuff so that I couldn't even go anywhere. The They would hold your hand on where to go. There were sequences in which there'd be like a blue tarp, and I knew every time I saw a blue tarp that I could, jump up there or whatnot. And it was literally like someone holding my hand through the entire thing. The boss fights were extremely predictable. It's like, okay, they're gonna do this and this and this. Okay, next thing. They're gonna do this and this and this. Next thing. They're gonna do this and this and this. Next thing. Wish they could have done more, I guess, inventive ideas with the boss mechanics. That was really kind of lame. Other problems that I had with the design mechanics overall is the camera angles sometimes would be kind of awkward. They would kind of go behind a tree or something and you'd be like, I can't see my character, and it'd be kind of frustrating. And then the rolling mechanic where you actually like roll on the floor was extremely fast. I don't roll often, but I mean, that was ridiculous. I mean, I kind of wish I could roll that fast. I mean, it felt kind of awkward in compared to how you normally moved, so that's one thing that I really wish that they could have fixed. And also, trying to fire a spear, they use like one of the clicking sticks, I believe, on the R3 or the L3 button. It really didn't work well. I can't remember, or maybe it was double bumper. It wasn't a really good idea, and they should have fixed something like that. That's something that they really need to change. It needs to be an actual button if you're going to put that in the game. The story of Rise of Rome, Son of Rome, is one thing that really irritated me throughout this thing, but partially because I'm kind of a history buff. I have a history minor, and a lot of the ancient history in this thing isn't exactly accurate or close to being accurate. But I'm not gonna, knock on this review because of historical inaccuracy, because a lot of people don't know the history of, ancient Rome. But it started out as a great story, and the depiction of Nero and the barbarians was actually fantastic. The scenes of going through the woods and you seeing just nothing but slaughtered bodies all over the place. They did a really good depiction of, I guess, the feel of what Rome was like back then during Nero's reign. It was kind of, he was kind of ridiculous. But other than that, it bothered me that it was historically inaccurate. And then the thing that really irritated me is they kind of curveball the story at the very end. I mean, you start off with this story, of you're this Roman soldier and you're fighting for Rome and so forth, and then it just kind of goes out of control, and then towards the end it's like a whole different story at the very end from what it was originally. And I didn't really like that, how they did that. I wish they had just stuck with Marius, being the general of Rome and whatnot and so forth, but they didn't, and that was kind of irritating and disappointing for me. The story elements happened at the beginning and the end of each chapter. Now, I do like how the story was supposed to be you fighting through these missions and so forth, but the missions were too long. I would have much rather, if you're gonna stick to there being a story element at the beginning and the end of each chapter, separate it. Even if the game's the same length, make the length of the game, make the chapters of the game go from 8 chapters to 16 chapters, and then make each one of those chapters shorter and have more story elements into it. that would have kept me wanting to play more. I found times in this game in which I was like, okay, I need to stop, I've had enough for now. And I don't like it when that happens. As far as the story, if it's a story-driven game, I want to sit there and be like, man, I have to keep playing this. Like, this is so much fun. And I never got that in Ryse Son of the Rome, possibly because the elements were too far apart from one another, and that was kind of irritating. But for the most part, I liked the story when you actually got to it, but it was frustrating to wait so long through a mission just to get to a story element. So next time around, if they do Ryse Son of Rome, I feel that there's a lot of potential that they can go with this. There's a lot of potential in anything if you decide to go in history. I think that's proven in Assassin's Creed series. Um, they need to change it up, and they need to make the chapters smaller and have more story elements in between them if you're going to make I guess the gameplay story, Marius, fighting through whatever and so forth. So one thing they do need to change for the future of this franchise if they plan to go forward with it. One of the most surprising things in Ryse Son of Rome was actually the multiplayer of the game. When I saw that there was multiplayer, I was like, man, this is just going to be another multiplayer that's thrown in there for the sake of throwing in multiplayer, and I was genuinely surprised, and I tried it out, and I ended up playing several hours with it because it was just so much fun. They basically just take two gladiators and throw you in a pit and have you, defend against waves of barbarians and so forth. And I looked at the multiplayer and I was like, there is so much potential in this system. Right now you can see me, I'm protecting an objective, and the events constantly change. Like, I could be protecting an objective, I could be, destroying a catapult, I could be chasing down a messenger. It would constantly change throughout it, and they had different maps, and the arena would change based on that, and it made the multiplayer a lot of fun. There's so much potential they could have in this. They could add more people. It could be a four-person multiplayer and have 4 gladiators in here trying to defend against stuff. They could add in animals. They had that in ancient Rome, which would have been cool. There's a lot of stuff they can add to this. I just saw this multiplayer. I'm like, there's so much potential in this system. There's so much that they can do more in this system to make it a lot of fun. And that's the one thing that really impressed me with the multiplayer, and it made the game that much more exciting and fun to play. I dumped at least 3 to 4 hours into this multiplayer, which was awesome for a multiplayer that I expected to, not be very good, and to be just a, hey, we're gonna throw this in here for the sake of throwing it in here. I mean, you don't see me here with any customization, but you can put customization gear, and you can like build up your gladiator to some degree, kind of a small degree, but if they ever come up with another Ryse, they can really do that. They can make you customize your gladiator. They can make you can make yourself look like a boss, and that's something that I think will be a lot of fun to do in if they make another installment of Ryse. The gameplay value of Ryse is not necessarily the greatest. That mostly is due to the poor storyline and how long it takes to get in between story elements. If it's a game, completely based on the story, you need to have the story continue to drive you, and there are points in which I was like, I cannot justify doing another chapter just to see what happens at the end of that chapter. So that was a huge problem. The design mechanics of the fighting and so forth became too repetitive, and they needed to fix that, and I mentioned ways that they could really make it more entertaining and so forth. The multiplayer was a huge surprise, and it came and it really added gameplay value to the game, but it wasn't enough to overcome, the single player, which was the main focus of this game, to make it better. So they have some things that they can fix. I mean, in the game they had collectibles that you could, see a picture of the game and so forth, and it gave you a fake sense of open world. I kind of wish it was an open world, like you could travel around Rome, which would be awesome. But otherwise it just became repetitive, and I had no desire to go back through the missions and do it over again just to get to it. So overall, this game gets a 7.6. I really feel like it was underrated, and people kind of trashed it a little too far than it needed to, but this game has a lot of potential in the future, and I hope that they fix some things and they bring out a new Ryse game because it'll be a lot of fun. Otherwise, 7.6 for Ryse Son of Rome. This is Tearless, and I'll see you guys later.
So the Emperor had them murdered. After all,